Welcome to another ETN Files. Not quite an interview, but it is a field trip. And, you know, there are many more mysteries right under our feet, often, aren't there? And now we're going to hear what Peter Vincent, who's a remote viewer, and Dowser, is going to tell us about an area we call the Mound in Calverley Grounds. Now, I've done quite a few field trips to Calverley Grounds over the several years with the full biolocation team. That's Geoffrey Crockford, Nigel Hughes, Don Hawkins and others, Alan Hayday. And this area is throwing up some amazing information. And, you know, there's never any money for research into these areas. The local powers that be do hold the strings. For example, relatively recently, maybe the last 100 years or so, well, less than that even actually, there's a trilithon, the two standing stones with the one across the top, and there was a wood hinge, and at one point they were seen to be sticking out of the ground like little shark's teeth, as if they were the remnants of another circle. This area was wantonly destroyed, vandalized by Tunbridge Council in the late 1970s, just before the Kent Act came in 1981 to, guess what, protect monuments. So now they want to make this area a wild area. So that would make it quite difficult for people to do anything like a geophys there. That's a geological physical examination of the area. And certainly it would make some of the other research modalities a little bit more tricky. You're going to hear something quite astonishing about some of the mysteries beneath our feet in the UK, and in this case, Tunbridge Wells, Kent. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to show you a live experiment. So Peter, can you give us a bit of an insight as to what we're going to be doing today?
And at the entrance we have an ancient mound that used to have a stone circle on it, which was removed in the late 1970s. But archaeologists have been, it shows evidence that this mound was man-made. It still has stones at the bottom that support the wash-off from this, which always happens when we have heavy rain and it floods the drains down below. Because of this, we started to do experiments on this, and we found something quite interesting that seems to show up deep below, with tunnels connecting to a large cavernous area.
This excerpt, filmed 19th September 2021, shows clearly the action of the rods using the colour olive green code, number 6 numerically, to detect tunnels and cavities.
What I'm going to show now is how the system works, because we know we've got underground tunnels here. So I'm going to show how the rods react on this green 6, which is green 6, just basically olive green 6. The mine reacts on that. It finds dirty water, sweaty tunnels and cavities below the ground at any depth. Right, I'm holding my rods out, and they are only going to measure the para response to the colour through the ferrous system, to my mind, that will react on the colour, the equivalent of what's below the ground.
There are 3 types of magnetism: paramagnetism, diamagnetism and ferromagnetism. These fields act on the body and are picked up through the rods, acting as an extension of the body, reflecting very small physical effects on the body, causing the rods to move.
I'll start producing now, working my way forward. And you feel a surge in your mind when it comes. Here we go, the rod's closed. So I've hit the cavity below the ground, and now I want to know how long and how big this cavity is. The rods will carry on staying crossed until that energy ferrous system depletes, and then they start to open up. As you can see, it's gradually, the energy is gradually depleting and they're coming up. So therefore, between that point there and this point here, there's a tunnel, a cavity below the ground. I'll do this from another angle. I'll come up from over here, because we have a big circular tunnel and we also have small tunnels leading, proper tunnels, so you can call it a cavity cave system. and then tunnels leading into it in a cross shape. So I'll come to this area here.
Using green 6 as the code, Peter's going to demonstrate again the picking up of the energy as he turns and comes back.
Right. I'll start here. So far it's solid ground. I'm holding that colour in my left hand, and bingo, the rods cross because we've hit that cavity below the ground. They stay crossed like that. So I'm doing this from the opposite direction now. And just keep going. Keep going. Your mind will react to the forces, magnetic forces. And there we are, it's opened up again. So we know that in this area we have a circular cavity below the ground. But in that cavernous area is something that responds to materials that we find in another site in the lower Adriatic, and that is an area below the sea that the divers have found where this grey material here is quite widespread, and we mustn't forget that this would have been the land at that time. Sea levels have risen, but on this area nothing grows and the fish don't like it. The ancients obviously got hold of this material and made this is what's called a hand-holding worshipping stone, and I found that this actually responds to what's below the ground. And there seem to be tunnels coming from the ancient manor house built by the Duke of Leeds, for which the young Princess Victoria stayed in her childhood, and we presume that she came here to be shown things, and maybe this is what she was being shown. And of course it's one of these secrets of Tunbridge Wells which is quite widespread. So archaeology in Tunbridge Wells is being actively pursued now, and they found extremely interesting things from the ancients that are on a par with Stonehenge, the same sort of settings, and they found evidence of Bronze Age, Iron Age, and even Roman remains. So now I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk and start to use this as a witness, and then by using this as a witness I will walk slowly, and when this responds the rod will cross like that.
And so Peter has put a flag in the first location where he had a response. And
The diameter is that, so now I come down here. So now I'm going to go into this area, and they should stay closed until I come off, when I'll plant the next flag, so I get an idea of the actual circumference of this object that's below the ground. And I can feel it now. There we are, we've opened up. So now I plant another flag. There we are. So I've got, the diameter is that. So now I come down here and I'll do the same this way round. I'll start here. And they close again. So now I've got the diameter of that. So I'll plant another flag there. Now I've got the closure. See, if I come off, the rod's open. If I go back, the rod's closed. So now what I'm going to do is to walk the width each way. Okay. I come in here and I've got a response here. So I plant the flag here. I'm still holding the material. And here we come here. I mean, it might be a few inches out. I'm getting an idea of something circular with the ground. Right. It's a little bit laborious, but the thing is, every time I go towards this area, the rod's cross. So what we're going to do now is to fill in this bit and then go around there, and then we'll get some sort of shape, you know. There can be a slight distortion to some of these things, depending on... Now I'm going to go over the other side and work my way round. Here. So they're not laborious. The thing is that you're getting a rough outline of what do a little bit of, see, I'm holding this here and there's absolutely no response to this material here at all. It's when I go into that area, I get response. There's no response to this material here at all. So when I walk in closer, I get a response here. So I'll plant another flag. I don't know, you can get distortions. Trees can actually give distortions to the magnetic fields. Also the sun can sometimes interfere with what you're doing. It's all magnetic, you see. Yep.
And these flags are just very useful to give
An indication.
an indication of shapes and size of what we're looking at.
And don't forget, we can form an opinion of what it is that's giving the shape down there. There may be bits of it as well sticking out, you know. So don't forget, this is the original material from now below the sea, washed up, that would have been used in a temple as a hand-holding worshipping stone. So they were worshipping something that the gods to them had provided.
Peter is having a look at some of the distortions that he's picked up and just leveling them out. So he might have been out by a few inches and now he's just testing that again.
Right. I'm now holding polycarbonate. You shouldn't find polycarbonate below this mound that goes back to the Stone Age, or pre-Bronze Age. I'm now holding polycarbonate and then we'll see what happens. And it's a very strong response.
So what does that tell you?
Well, whatever's below the ground has also got polycarbonate apart from that mixture there, and this washed up from the same area, which I believe is UFO material. It's washed up on the beach. Actual UFO material. So this is all over the area. Now we've got uranium, a uranium code. We'll see what we get with that. I've also got a craft general code that finds any non-human built craft in space as well, when we divine over the Earth basically, or over Mars or over the Moon or into the solar system. So we'll do that in a minute. So this is the uranium code, because yeah, a lot of these things worked on nuclear power, so we'll see what we find. In the middle we have a response to uranium.
So Peter is telling us that he's finding a response now to uranium.
Are we dealing with a craft from another world? So this is the code for that, which we've had ever since 2003. We can identify certain types of craft on certain codes, but this one is what we call a general code, so it works very nicely generally. So this is something that's not human, so you know, cross very, very quickly.
So what Peter is finding then from this collection of witnesses and codes is that it looks like we have a craft, or the remnants of a craft below.
We've got tungsten and titanium. It wasn't sort of discovered until recent years, and in actual fact titanium was used during World War II and after, and it was very limited as to where you could get the titanium. So we've got polycarbonate and titanium and uranium.
That closed very quickly.
Yeah, right, yeah. Very, very sensitive. And I'm using a titanium paint here, a titanium white, but I've actually got a sample of pure titanium as well, and it works just as well. So the thing is, when you find all these factors working on the same area, you have to start asking questions. Well, here is something now, chrome. They found in some models in Sardinia of the ancients, chrome ball bearing like things set in the actual ancient creations that the ancient tribes made. So where did they find the chrome ball bearings from? So I was able to code chrome, and it comes out to 2654910.7. So it's grey, green, yellow, orange, red, black and white. So we'll see what happens there. You have to then read it into your mind via sight. So 2654 910 7. 2654 910 7. Yeah, so we've got bits of chrome in here somehow. So whatever they were finding is also applicable here. And don't forget that this can be actually done over a map. We can remote view it from the comfort of your own home, from anywhere in the world. So I'm now going to do tungsten, which is 910 453. That's red, black, grey, orange, yellow and blue. And that's dark blue, because pale blue is 15 and that determines time. That's why a lot of church clocks are pale blue, particularly in cathedrals, on church spires. It's also found in medical identifications such as Alzheimer's and things like that. Right, 910 453. Yep. Here and there you've got responses to tungsten. Tungsten is in tools, so like weapons, things like that, or something like that. So they obviously found tungsten and ground it down, or found the remnants of it and stained their models and made it. So therefore there will be tungsten in the craft, because it will carry weapons and it will also carry tools. What we're looking at here is a crash craft, but under here we might have a preserved craft, and we'll come to that in a minute. So 115 is 1026495. Black, grey, green, orange, red and yellow. That's how the mind detects element 115. So you ask yourself, how on earth did the human mind know about that? Well, all these codes come via another code, and that other code knows everything because it's connected to a computer, and that is connected to, call it the gods above there, provides you through the sensory systems an entry gate, a portal or a mind data code. Here we are, element 115, so it won't be out here, will it? If we've got element 115 in here with the uranium, 115, 10 26495, 10 26495. So in the centre you've got something responding to element 115. Okay, so the ancients buried something in the mound. We've described that quite well. Yeah,
so we're going to look at the area then in which this craft is in.
This is applicable to anything, anywhere where there is a tunnel, a cave or a chamber.
Okay, how very interesting.
So now I'm holding green 6. So we know that from this point on there's a gap between here and there. And that would allow people to walk round this. So if you were worshipping something, you'd have to walk round it.
So we're looking at the tunnel element here.
So as you can see, this is a cavern, but it's also a cavern here, because this object is in something.
So what
walk round this,
Peter is describing,
whatever is under the ground,
that this craft can be accessed via an actual tunnel. See, you never know what's beneath your feet. So he's plotting out now where this tunnel leads. Also, we'll be looking at how wide it is. This is just such an amazing system.
And it would be interesting to find the entrance to this tunnel, which goes into their grounds. And the previous owners, when it was the Calverley Hotel, were quite emphatic to me that they felt along the back of the lower garden there was a tunnel running there, but it must go into the building itself. So there has to be a stairway down in the building that leads to a tunnel that then comes into the tunnels here, so that you can view whatever is here. But apart from that, we've also found tunnels going in other directions to the properties in Mount Pleasant Avenue. They have double depth basements there, and there's evidence that the lower depth basements have been bricked up.
Okay, so Peter is saying that the tunnel now is about 3 foot wide. And Peter's been doing this work since 2003. He's indicating that the tunnel underneath is up the bank, so it's extensive.
I mean, Tunbridge Wells was a relatively new town from the 1600s. It was originally the rural area of Tunbridge, and the Tunbridge had a priory, and the canons ran the priory, and they were also the guardians of the citadel in Jerusalem. So a Norman manor allowed them the run of that, of which this whole area was part of the Norman manor. But when Edward II came to the throne, he seized this land for a debt, some arrangement, so it became crown property, which is quite interesting because since in the late Victorian times, Tunbridge Wells was created. Tunbridge was given the spelling T-O-N. Tunbridge Wells took the original Tunbridge, the U, T-U-N, and became Tunbridge Wells because of the wells. And under Act of Parliament, its own council was formed, and basically there was something called the Kent Act that protected the common and everything around. And this was part of the manor house. This was a hay meadow originally. Yeah. So the council acquired it. Well, what can you do? They turned it into a park. But in those days, listing a park was not possible. There was no grading in those 1920s. So when grading came along, they created I think it's grade 2 listed. Well, the problem is, it should have been listed as a monument because there were standing stones on here, and we have photographs showing the stones pushed down, and there was a giant dolmen stone in the middle with a hole under it, and that was taken away in the end to the old council yard, which then became an indoor bowling alley, and then the stone was taken away for breaking up. All the rest of the stones, of course, received the same treatment. They were all carted away. A JCB came in, loaded them on a lorry, and off it went.
What vandalism?
Yes, I witnessed this, but you see, if it had carried over into the 1980s, a new Act of Parliament was going through to protect such areas like this. You couldn't do it.
So was that in the 70s?
Late 70s, before the Act was enforced. The reading of the Act had started in the meantime. So usual crafty things of trying to avoid being caught out, because if you wanted to develop this bit of land here, then it would have stopped you doing it. Well, what is interesting, we can see 4 or 5 big pine trees here. And would you believe it, that these pine trees originally formed a complete circle.
Oh, really?
Victorian maps in 1808, the map, early map of this area, showed this as a ring of pine trees, other than stone circles. But there were other archaeological items. A later 1911 OS microfiche film showed sharks' teeth sticking out of the ground here, which represents the stones, basically. But in the trees over there was a triathlon. 2 vertical stones, or pillars, with a plinth on top. And it had obviously been revered because the left-hand one had been supported with a block to stop it falling over. It was very, very rickety. There was ivy going up it, and of course all this erosion had undermined it a bit. When Geoffrey Crockford came here many years ago and wrote about this site here, it's in chapter 15 of The Secret of the Stones by Geoffrey Crockford and Nigel Hughes, he found some Celtic tiling down there. And
oh, did he?
The thing is that everything I found fits with what he found, that there was a river running down there, and they had a way of drawing water up here for the temple, and quite well written up. And they found a Welsh site which they researched with exactly the same sort of technology of the ancients in the Bronze Age and Iron Age, you know. So this park is really quite historical, actually. The problem is this, that what do you do with something like this in this day and age other than getting the military to dig it up? But it would be nice to find the access to this tunnel and to have a look and see what it is.
What would be great would be to get a geophys team over, wouldn't it?
Because that will show. You can get geophys down to 30 feet with the modern technology now. I mean, in Egypt, they're going over with satellites and picking up huge cities, and they're being able to rebuild the cities as well in 3D. There are beautiful programs about this. Archaeology has moved on an enormous amount, and of course people don't look at these programmes. They're not on the mainline BBC One, BBC Two, the Blaze, Drama and channels like that. You know, they're not created in the UK, they're created in America, where it's much freer.
So you think, and I think, that there is either a craft in situ down here below.
We have found 2 other areas in this park on other little projects that respond to the same sort of materials, but not round like this. Under the old bowling green, we found what looked like a delta wing craft, about 90 foot long and 53 odd feet width at the back of the delta wings, and we've actually managed to flag that out and record it before they turned it into a children's playground, and that we felt was about 60 feet down. We also found another silo over there, and by the way, these are in 100-foot diameter silos, so having something 53 feet wide and 90 feet long fitted quite well within that. And we found another silo. I didn't pick up the silo. What happened was I picked up something that was connected to religion, and Nigel Hughes came down and found something connected to religion. So I thought, well, I'll get an independent person to come and have a look at this. So we got hold of the well-known gentleman John Baker, who's a very well-known diviner for water. You can get him on H2O Baker. He kindly came down and had a look around. He said, I really only do foundations and water. He said, you know, you've got an enormous brick silo here. So he went round, and I've actually got pictures of him doing this, and he went round and he said it's about 100 foot in diameter, which I thought, well, that's what we found on the bowling green. Now, I didn't tell him about that, and that meant that there had to be something more there other than this little religious chapel or whatever it is. So I then went back and I found that it was about 60 or more feet deep, and that there were 2 floors in this, and one of them was supported on brick pillars, and that there was a staircase going down. So doing research into this, and I found 1 or 2 quite learned people who seemed to know a bit more than I did, and one gentleman turned around to me and said, well, how many steps down? Was there a plinth, was there a brick on top of another brick? And if you found that, were there any symbols on it? So I thought, well, what do you know that I don't? This thing then at the bottom with this other thing on top, and then we've got crashed UFO bits in there, but not all together, but of the same delta shape as that one down there. So we have one here, one over there, one over there. And where else are you going to find a Roswell in the United Kingdom, you know? I mean, it would attract an awful lot of people.